Today I'm going to talk a little bit about optimizing sound checks, learning some best practices in order to minimize the amount of time that you need, as well as optimizing those narrow time slots so that we're using them most efficiently as we possibly can. The way I approach it is, if the band is comfortable on stage, if the artist is familiar with the environment, they know how it's going to sound, there's not a lot of surprises for them, they can really get into performing well and are going to see a much better show, more momentum on the tour, maybe more sales. It's better for everybody and it makes it more fun. Conversely, the band comes out on stage and things don't sound right and they spend the first chunk of time or the whole set asking for changes or frustrated or distracted. That tends to make them unhappy, which in turn makes us unhappy, but nobody wins in that situation. So how do we get these artists or the performers, whatever you're doing, to be comfortable? Generally, it's getting them some time on stage, getting them as much time as possible with their gear set up and functioning. The approach I try to use is a very active sound check, where I'm actually line checking and sound checking as much as possible while the band is playing. We've got 45 minutes to sound check. When you guys do or gals do get on stage, the best thing in the world for me as a sound engineer is if you start playing songs. You just start rehearsing, play what you're going to play new songs, just mess around, whatever it is, but give me as much live time as possible with everybody playing. And then while that's happening, I'll get my tones and put the show together. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about sound check scenarios or line check scenarios. All right, so there's pretty much 6 different sonic scenarios that we face or implement or can work with during a sound check or line check. The first one is all off. All off obviously is before and after the show, and you're stable on stage, you're setting up, no big deal there. Each of these scenarios has its own usage, positives and negatives. The second one mic, one instrument. So that's, hit the kick drum. Let's hear it. Let's tune that up. Let's get the sound of that kick drum sounding how we want it to sound. And then we go ahead and ask for the snare drum. Cap, cap, cap. You hit the snare and we go through these instruments one at a time, muting each one as we go. One of the things to pay attention to here is if you do have a dead channel, there's no reason to have rack tom doesn't work. You stop sound check completely and you fix the tom. If you're actually pushing up against your sound check time, valuable band time or artist time on stage, having this come to a grinding halt is probably not the optimum usage of time. Okay, first tom is bad. Say, let's get back to it and carry on through the rest of the inputs. And at the end, you have 2 or 3 bad channels. Or you might find a pattern and it helps you figure out, well, this subsnake's not patched right, or, just fix it later. Maybe you do the whole sound check without it and then you fix that at, during set change or some other point. Okay, so one mic, one instrument, and typically we see a lot of time being spent as people go through that, the text. The next is situation 3, one mic, all instruments. Now this is a little interesting because unlike one mic, one instrument, where you're listening to, say, the kick drum with the kick drum mic on, you're hearing how much bass guitar is bleeding into the kick drum mic, or whether it's rattling the drum riser, or there's some resonant heads on the toms that are or gear rattling, hearing the bleed from the various instruments. And that could be, or that always is, valuable information that's lost when you have just one mic, one instrument. Scenario number 4, all mics, one instrument. So this is where you would have, maybe you're hitting just the kick drum, someone's hitting the kick drum for you, but you turn on all the rest of the mics. So now you have the reverse scenario where you hear that kick drum coming in to that kick drum mic, but you also hear how much of that kick drum or the kick drum drum fill combination is bleeding in to the tom mics or to the guitar mics or into the vocal mic. And there's some valuable information there, which will definitely change the way that the mix sounds. And we'll go to scenario number 5, all mics, no instruments. Now that is I use that after we're done being set up. Before we strike, I'll turn all the mics on with no instruments playing. Maybe people are wandering around stage moving stuff. And I'll check my stability level of the overall mix. Is something on the verge of feeding back? Now that I've got my mix together, I want to make sure I'm stable. How much headroom do I have? Can I push the PA up another 3 to 6 dB without it feeding back into the main PA? or the monitors. So all this applies to monitors as well. And then finally, we have all mics, all instruments. And that's the show scenario where we have, obviously, everybody's playing. Okay, so let's take a look at this. If we have the sound of the kick drum, we get that nice and tight. We turn on all the tom mics and we turn on the bass mics, guitar mics. Now the kick drum's going bong, bong. And we gate it out. But the gating, even with the gate on the kick, it's still resonating the toms. We gate those. And we've got this. We've made adjustments to the kick drum based on the sound of just the kick into the kick mic. But that sound's being altered by that kick bleeding into other instruments. If all those mics are on, now we're EQing the kick drum. We can start to not do detrimental changes, EQ something out or leave something in that needs to come out. Having the artist come out and just start playing and explain to them, look, I'm going to sound check while you guys are rehearsing, while you guys are going through the set or whatever you want to do. And they just play songs. Things will be going up and down in the main PA. Maybe I'll spend the first 3 or 4 minutes working with the monitor engineer, assisting, talking to the various band members. What do you want more? Help the monitor engineer get up to speed as quickly as possible, and then run out front. And while they're playing, if in a perfect situation, they'll just start playing song after song after song. And I'll bring the kick drum up and I'll listen to the kick drum with all the instruments bleeding into it and how much bass is getting in there and how things are resonating, and the resonating of the drum riser. And I'll EQ that to be correct. And I'll get the snare drum and the snare top and bottom. I'll get those, get the kick snare hi-hat, and I'll take that as a package and I'll bring it down. And then I'll get the bass. I'll EQ the bass DI, the bass mic, get that sounding good. Then I'll bring the kick snare hat up with the bass, and I'll get those two working together, and then I'll dump them and then bring up the guitars. Meanwhile, they're just playing song after song, getting valuable sound check time in. Bring the guitars up, get those panned out, get those EQs together, then try guitar versus bass, get that dialed in, get the drums versus guitar, drums versus bass versus guitar, dump all that down, bring the vocal up, EQ that, throw the vocal guitar, vocal bass, vocal drum, and then start, doing all these combos. That is really valuable information that you can't do live during the show. And it doesn't happen with this one-at-a-time linear check either, where you're able to hear the interaction of these segments, these combos, dumping everything except for toms. Bring just toms up and get a nice broad tom with the whole band playing and get rid of any weird resonances there and get the sounds you need. And at the end of it, if everything runs smooth, front of house has got a good solid sound. The band has been working with the monitor engineer. They've got a great sound on stage. The band has had some time. They've done some adjustments to their rigs and got things tuned up. And we're show ready. And we've utilized that half an hour, 45 or an hour, whatever our sound check time is, to its fullest, and got the valuable information and not spent a lot of time on what I consider to be very low priority info, which is single mic, single instrument, which typically is never going to exist again, not during the show. Unless you're going to mute every mic and just have a kick drum solo, you don't really need that sound or that info. All right, that's it for today, and I'll be back with another one soon. Cool.